And without further ado, I will introduce our speaker. So Kristan Hawkins is a Christian, wife, mother, grassroots activist, author, speaker, podcast host, and a human rights advocate. President of Students for Life of America and Students for Life Action, she was recruited in 2006 to launch Students for Life of America's full-time operation. Since then, she has built up a small organization made up of a few dozen student groups scattered around the country to a coordinated national team that serves 1,200 plus Students for Life chapters in all 50 states and has trained over 100,000 young people. Under her leadership, Students for Life exists to abolish abortion by transforming our culture, by recruiting, training, and mobilizing this pro-life generation, who are the direct targets of today's abortion industry. No entity has more mind-changing conversations about abortion, on campus or online, every day than Students for Life. A frequent speaker and media analyst, Kristan's expertise includes abortion, feminism, disability advocacy, and healthcare, as she navigates the social conditions and public policy that impacts the human rights issue of our day. She graduated from Bethany College in 2005, summa cum laude, with a bachelor's in political science, having already jumped into the pro-life community by founding pro-life groups in both her high school and college campuses. Before launching Students for Life, she served at the Republican National Committee and as a presidential appointee in the George W. Bush administration at the Department of Health and Human Services. In 2016 and 2020, she served on the then candidate Donald Trump's Pro-Life Advisory Council. She hosts a weekly podcast titled Explicitly Pro-Life, found on iTunes and YouTube, and published Courageous, Students Abolishing Abortion in Our Lifetime. She has interviewed on Fox News, CNN, MSNBC, The Today Show, CBS, ABC, and HBO, and has recently received the title, One of the 4 Worst Anti-Abortion Misinformers by Media Matters, a title of which she is very proud. Kristan regularly speaks at pro-life conventions and events across the United States, including leading college campuses such as Yale, Harvard, Dartmouth, and UC Berkeley. Her proudest accomplishment is being a wife to her high school sweetheart, Jonathan, raising her 4 children, Gunnar, Bear, Maverick, and Gracie, and in her free time, building awareness for cystic fibrosis, a disease shared by both her son, Gunnar, and her daughter, Gracie. Since launching Students for Life, the pro-life generation has been given a voice in Kristan, and with her help, they are using that voice to demand an end to the injustice of abortion, as well as support for mothers and their children, born and preborn. It is my pleasure to introduce Kristan Hawkins.
Thank you all for coming tonight. It's going to be fun to talk with everyone about the most fun conversation you can have with anybody, and that's abortion. It makes you super popular at like every party you go to if you talk about abortion, politics, and religion, and I usually end up talking about all 3 of those things. So as you can imagine, I'm super popular. I know when abortion advocates and apologists heard the title of my talk tonight, there probably or likely were feelings of outrage or belief with the thought that I'm either a complete moron who is blind to the current political realities inside of Washington, D.C., or I'm an extremist, a religious extremist who believes God is coming back to earth tomorrow and will reverse more than 45 years, almost 50 years of abortion laws in one fell swoop. Now, I'm a Christian. I believe God could do that. I don't think that's going to happen, though. And I'm fairly certain I'm not a complete moron. I did have a high IQ test. I have been tested, so I know I'm not a moron. But I still believe that our nation, the future of our country, will in fact be anti-abortion. I know that also can invoke feelings of fear or shame from those who have made or been part of abortion decisions in your past. Let me assure you that talking about a future that is anti-abortion, there is no intention from those of us who serve in this human rights cause to do that. In fact, if you know of a friend who's experiencing an unplanned crisis pregnancy right now, I would highly encourage you to talk to her about going to optionline.org or texting helpline to the number 313131 to get connected with those right here in the community and throughout the state of Kentucky who stand ready and willing to help her. If you or a friend are hurting from a past abortion decision, I encourage you to go to abortionchangesyou.org or abortionrecovery.org to get connected to licensed clinical counselors and those who can help you process the grief and trauma and get you back on the path to healing. Now, the political extremism and the theatrics that we're watching in Washington right now, I actually believe those things actually prove my point. That after 4 years of anti-abortion policies from President Trump and his administration, the abortion lobby is completely desperate to quickly reverse all trends. Their goal is to silence those who oppose abortion for anyone that disagrees with them, and to reverse more than 40 years of state policies to force every American taxpayer, regardless of how they feel about abortion, regardless of their personal or religious beliefs, to fund abortions in all 9 months of pregnancy for any reason. This is something that's grossly unpopular. Actually, in fact, more than 80% of Americans and consistently poll that they do not want to be forced to pay for abortions, regardless of how they feel about abortion. And this is, can be demonstrated with several laws, several actions that have already been taken since the beginning of January when, end of January, I guess, when Joe Biden and Kamala Harris were sworn in and a new Congress resumed session. Currently, there's several bills that have already been voted out of the House with, support from every single Democrat that are awaiting a vote in the Senate that will just do that. They will silence any opposition and actually punish opposition to any talk about what's happening in Washington, D.C. I believe this is overplaying their hand. I know why they're moving quickly to do so. It's the honeymoon period of a new presidency. They can do a lot. Abortion advocates can actually do a lot right now while the media is distracted and not really paying attention. But I think their actions, their deeds, what they're doing right now proves our point that they fear the reality that we know is coming, which is very near, which is a nation without abortion. And I believe this has to be because science and technology have proven that what is inside of a mother is simply not a useless blob of tissue, a meaningless blob of tissue, but a unique, whole, living human being, a member of our species that has never existed before and will never exist again. It's simply science denial to ignore that human life begins at the moment of conception. That's it. We know this. We can look at testimony after testimony of researchers and scientists at Congress. You can read an embryology textbook to know that there is no other point where something comes into existence that didn't exist before than when sperm and egg unite and a unique whole living human being with a unique DNA code comes into existence. This is irrefutable. Science and technology prove this. The ultrasound, the great window to the womb, proves what is inside of a mother is more than just a blob of tissue. Consider that just 21 days after conception, before women even know they're pregnant, heart begins to beat. A heart. At 6 weeks after the mother's last menstrual cycle, her LMP, brainwave activity has begun. Arm and leg bones have begun to form. There's already tooth buds that are forming. At 7 weeks LMP, the formation of that heart that began to beat at 21 days is nearly complete. The baby can hiccup, rotate his or her head, and move his or her legs. At 8 weeks, just 2 months after LMP, fingers and toes are webbed, but they're growing. Urine production and release begins. I always tell a story, I think it's My kids always get a kick out of it. My daughter is my only child that we have video of her birth, and she was born via C-section, and as soon as she emerged out of my womb, she promptly peed all over me. And my kids find that so gross and fascinating and want to watch it all the time, of Gracie peeing inside mom's stomach. That happens at 8 weeks and continues to happen throughout the entire pregnancy. At 9 weeks, a child can suck his or her thumb. The baby can yawn. At 10 weeks, fingernails and toenails start to grow. Unique fingerprints are already formed. At 11 weeks, his or her nose and lips are completely formed and complex facial expressions begin. At 12 weeks, a child already has taste buds all over his or her mouth. At 13 weeks, just the beginning of the second trimester, most of the child's body is already sensitive to the touch. While you may personally like the label pro-choice or naively agree with the my body, my choice rhetoric, to deny that life begins, human life begins at conception, or that the fetus inside of the womb is not a member of our species, is not a human being, that's simply to be a science denier. That's what it is. Pro-life and pro-choice scientists, pro-life and pro-choice scientists agree and have said that children in the womb who are going under surgery, who are being operated on, especially in cases of spina bifida, they must be administered anesthesia because they feel pain. But that's not offered during an abortion. When it comes to abortion, we argue that it's a meaningless blob of tissue. After acknowledging what science proves, the only conclusion that you can draw is the result of every single abortion, regardless of how you feel about it, is a dead human being. Because there is no argument that can be made that what is inside of a woman is not a human being, is not a member of our species. In fact, I was dialoguing with someone today right outside who I asked this gentleman if what was inside of a mother was a member of our species, and he paused. This is somebody who is he's in the master's program for economics. He paused and he said, well, he couldn't even say that what was inside of a woman was a human being, was a member of our species. That's just fetus phobic. It's unbelievable. And I actually said, I'm sorry the school system failed you, because everyone knows the law of biogenesis proves that like begets like. A human and a human cannot reproduce anything else besides a human being. You may argue that that human being doesn't have value or doesn't have the same value as you do, but you can't argue it's not a human being. But sadly, some may do. In addition, I actually trust the pictures and the videos that you can see from current and former abortionists that have shot videos and taken pictures during abortions or after abortions in order to instruct future abortionists and their techniques. I trust those pictures to show that every single abortion is violence. Every abortion, every child in abortion meets a violent end. Pro-life and pro-choice can't deny that every abortion ends a beating heart. That the abortionist only will know success in his or her job if a beating heart ceases to beat. In fact, if an abortionist leaves that heart beating, they have failed in their abortion. They have failed in their job, because their job is to end the beating heart of another living member of our species. That's their job. Thinking about my conversation earlier today, I had asked this gentleman if he knew what happens in an abortion procedure. Despite reading Roe and reading Casey, he had never actually researched what happens in an abortion procedure. I think if you're going to advocate for abortion, you should know what abortion is. Today in America, the most common type of abortion, it's committed in the first trimester, where the majority of abortions are committed, is a suction abortion. After dilating the cervix, a suction curette, which is a clear tube with a serrated tip, is inserted into the woman's uterus. The suction device is turned on. That suction device is 29 times more powerful than your household vacuum, and it tears the baby's body apart, sucks the child through the tube, through the hose. This is the most common type of abortion that happens in America today. I have a good friend, Jocelyn, who I met a couple years ago, lives in Des Moines, who to this day cannot go in and receive dental care because the machines at the dentist's office sound too much like the suction device. And this is a common complaint we hear of women who've undergone a suction abortion, could afford the local anesthetic as opposed to a full twilight anesthetic, and were awake and heard the abortion procedure. Jocelyn's had numerous tooth abscesses and all these dental problems, and is not able, despite all the pain that she endures, to bring herself to go into a dental clinic. The second most common type of abortion now, soon to be the most common type, is an RU486 chemical abortion. This is used, it's supposed to be used through the 7th week of pregnancy. Planned Parenthood is openly saying they are prescribing way later than that, up to 11 weeks. This is a synthetic steroid that blocks the hormone progesterone, which starves the child, and then that's the first pill. The second pill she takes induces contractions and allows her to miscarry. They call it a miscarry at her home. She is instructed when the bleeding gets too heavy to sit on the toilet and do not look, just keep flushing. Why? Because a lot of women take pictures of the child they've aborted and then come up and, if you serve in the pro-life movement, show us those pictures. A D&E abortion is committed up into 18 weeks. Sometimes they can commit them later, around 20, 21 weeks. It kind of depends on the fitness level of the abortionist and the muscle power of the abortionist. This is the most common type of abortion that's committed in the second trimester. Forceps are inserted into the uterus, and they grab and twist the body of the child. This is a Sofer clamp, so this is something you can use. It's serrated, it actually bites, and it latches on. And so they can use this type of tool where you're supposed to grab limbs first, according to the National Abortion Federation and their abortion training guide. It clasps, you twist, and you pull down. And you go for limbs first, then torso, and then finally the head. They collect the pieces of the child. They'll take those pieces back to the POC lab, products of conception lab, make sure they've gotten all the pieces of the child. They'll use this kind of loop shape curette to scrape the woman's uterus to make sure the placenta, all tissue, and any parts of the child that came off that did not in one fell swoop are taken out of the uterus, so there can't be anything left for infection. That is the most common type of second trimester abortion. The head gets a little tricky. There's an undercover video of a former Planned Parenthood abortionist who operates one of the largest abortion facilities in Arizona, saying that she had to keep going to the gym because this action took a lot of muscle power to be able to crush the skull of the child. And after 21 weeks, it was just simply too difficult because the skull bones were too well formed. The most common type of late-term abortion, I find this interesting. People will often argue that late-term abortions don't happen. Roe versus Wade and Doe versus Bolton, the two decisions that legalized abortion in 1973, allow abortion up until the moment of birth. States can individually act. The Supreme Court has said states can individually act to restrict abortion at certain points, but some states allow late-term abortion. You can go to Nebraska, you can go to Maryland, and you can get an abortion. There's a doctor there, Dr. Carhart, who commits them up until 36 weeks. There's an abortion facility in Albuquerque, New Mexico, which is the late-term abortion capital of the world, that commits them up until birth. Late-term abortions are most commonly done right now using, we call them heart attack abortions, where a drug, digoxin, is inserted in through the abdomen of the mother, kind of like you do an amniocentesis using ultrasound-guided technology. The needle is to pierce the amniotic sac, to pierce the child. Digoxin is inserted into the child's heart, and the goal is to induce a cardiac arrest, a heart attack. The mother's cervix, she has Lumeria inserted to prepare her for delivery, but she walks around for a couple of days while her cervix is being ripened, while she's dilating, and allows her child to slowly die of a heart attack in the womb. This is the reality of late-term abortion. This is the reality of all abortion. It's just violent. If you support abortion, you have to be okay with that, because that's what you're advocating. I also believe the future will be anti-abortion because our generation, thankfully, believes that human life matters. I think one of the things I love most about Gen Y and Gen Z is that, despite, any perceived lack of skill or ability or, financial means, we believe that change is possible and that we have a role to play in enacting change, that we're not just complacent, we're not willing to let injustice happen. We know we can actually do something to stop it. And we believe, and we're unafraid to stand up to say every human life matters. And I love that, because I think this is a message that our nation and our culture is really starving for. In fact, it's been the pro-life movement that's been advocating this very simple message that human life matters for almost 50 years. Like, that's what we do. That is who we are. That's it. That's our message. Our own polling at Students for Life this January actually found that even though the mainstream media might paint our generation as a bunch of gun-ho abortion advocates or activists, millennials and Gen Z actually don't support unlimited abortion and the extreme policies and extreme positions that are currently being championed in Congress right now. In fact, less than 2 out of 10, 18% that we polled said that they were okay with unlimited abortion through all 9 months for any reason with taxpayer funding. That's exactly what Roe allows. That's exactly what Democrats in Congress are arguing. In fact, that is the official platform of the Democratic National Committee as of 2016. Abortion wherever, whenever, any reason, all 9 months, taxpayer funded by you and I. That's the official platform of the Democratic National Committee. Yet, the most liberal voting bloc in the American electorate, 18% of them agree with that. More than 7 out of 10, 70% of 18 to 34-year-olds that we polled said they supported practical limits on abortion. 48%, a plurality, said that they did not want their money to be used to pay for abortions in America, and 53% worldwide. The most shocking statistic that we saw in the research we performed, almost half, a plurality, said that abortion should be banned when a heartbeat is detected in a human being. That's every single abortion that's committed today. Further, I think our future will be anti-abortion because women are now rejecting the abortion industry's gaslighting. And they're speaking out about the real ways abortion harmed them through their lived experiences. Recently, Jamila Jamil, an actress from The Good Place, which I haven't watched it, my staff loves the show, said that having a baby, I saw this on Facebook, she said that having a baby can, quote, fucking ruin everything. For a lot of women in our society, it was the abortion that fucking ruined everything. Abortion harms women physically and psychologically. Physically, there's long-term effects. The abortion can cause her harm to her fertility, her ability to get pregnant again, her ability to sustain a pregnancy, to gestate another human being. One of the most common things, every time I went into the OB's office after I took a home pregnancy test, after asking me how I pay for abortion, my delivery, which it was always very weird because they asked, what are you going to do, a C-section or natural birth? And I was like, I don't oh, but they always would ask you, like, so it's different price points. If you want a C-section, it's more money, by the way. After they asked me that question, the next question they would ask is, how many live births have you had? How many miscarriages have you had? And how many abortions have you had? Why? Because this is common information that doctors need to know, because they understand that abortions dramatically increase your risk for things like placenta previa and preterm birth. In the short term, abortion can cause complications like a perforated uterus, when things, pierce the side of the uterine wall, infection, hemorrhage. Psychologically, abortion can lead to suicidal ideation, PTSD, nervous disorders, substance abuse. One of the most common things we often hear from women who regret their abortions is this feeling of this inability to bond with future children. Abortion isn't great for women, but yet we're told from the powers that be that abortion is some great empowerment that women are only empowered in our land unless they have access to a special surgery that denies another human being their right to live. We have the Shout Your Abortion campaigns where women are supposed to go online and gush about their abortions and how abortion suddenly allowed a woman to graduate college or get the job of her dreams. Yet thousands and thousands of women from across the globe will tell a dramatically different story, and they're starting to speak out. I think this attempt to shove down everyone's throats that abortion is such a good thing is a form of gaslighting. Post-abortive women are constantly gaslit by professors, Hollywood, the mainstream media, Planned Parenthood, and the other abortion industry activists who all look them in the face and tell them that their pain is not real. The feelings they have are fake. And I just don't buy that we should sacrifice women's mental health or women's physical health on this altar of abortion. There's a website out there called Silent No More Awareness, and I encourage you to go to it. It's a nonprofit organization that simply collects stories of men and women who've been involved in an abortion decision, had an abortion. And you can go on there and search things like sexual assault, poverty, and they have everything like keyword tagged based on a woman or a man's testimony that they write out. And I was on there a couple weeks ago, and there's a story from Jamie. She said, over 22 years ago, I was 20 years old, living with a very abusive man and our 6-month-old baby. I was devastated when I found out I was pregnant again. I could barely take care of myself and the baby, let alone have another infant. I knew I couldn't stay in this toxic situation, but I couldn't see a way past the crippling fear of screwing up another life. So I chose to do what we women fight for. I had an abortion. I was up all night prior pleading with God to take the child with me so I wouldn't have to follow through. But he didn't, so I did. I was already so broken and hated myself so much that I convinced myself that it just wasn't a baby, it was a blob. I refused additional pain medicine to give me comfort. I remember it being cold and chilling. There was no love or compassion in the room, just the sound of a blender and the pain that I'm still able to feel today. I looked down and what I saw haunted me for decades. Or Veronica, who wrote, I had an abortion because my pregnancy was unplanned and the father of the baby told me I had to have an abortion. I didn't think I could do it alone. I didn't think I would have any support from my family because I didn't have a close relationship. And my finances were extremely tight. My past had taught me that men never stay, as I'd never had a father figure who stayed with me. During the abortion procedure, I experienced a lot of pain. The clinic staff were not helpful or kind and did not act like they cared for me at all. I have vivid memories of the things I saw, heard, and smelled that day. Immediately after the abortion, I felt regret, but I also felt relief because my crisis was over. I had wanted nothing to do with the father of my baby. I just wanted to be alone, and I felt disgusted. As time went on after the abortion, I stuffed my feelings as deep down as I possibly could. Though it was pushed down deep, it crept up into my relationship. It prevented me from bonding with my oldest living child because I couldn't help think that I should have already experienced all of these mom things that I was experiencing with my baby that I had aborted. It also put a lot of stress on my marriage, and it almost destroyed it. And finally, I believe our future will be anti-abortion because women no longer have to believe the lie that we need abortion in order to succeed. Women don't have abortions because they find it empowering to get pregnant and then have their children killed. I've been in front of abortion facilities on Saturday mornings counseling women. That's not a joyous day. It's not a joyous moment. There's not celebration happening out there. It's not a woman saying, just going to exercise my constitutional right. The comments you often hear are, I just can't have my baby right now. I can't do it right now. I can't afford this. Two of the most common reasons women have abortion is because the relationship with their partner, the person who got them pregnant, is unstable, and they are financially insecure. A baby coming into existence underscores all of these real problems that many pregnant women have in their lives. In the short term, it can seem easier to get rid of the baby, to end the life of the baby, than to achieve the stability she is lacking. But ending the life of a child doesn't actually improve her situation. In fact, I would argue it could make it much, much worse. Instead of looking for ways to help women in this situation, which I believe is the empowering thing to do, the abortion lobby will double down on their promotion of abortion. I believe women don't have to choose to make that false choice between themselves and their education or their future career. While things aren't perfect in our country, she has more protected rights than ever before. She has a society now that doesn't condemn single motherhood if the father refuses to man up. There are thousands of pregnancy centers and maternity homes established across the nation that have been dedicated to serving her. The real people putting these resources together to create a tangible solution, a network of support, are the pro-life advocates, is the pro-life movement. We're finding ways to provide housing and childcare, emotional support, medical care, maternal assistance, parenting classes, connections to other community resources. That's what we do. That's half of what we do in our mission to make abortion illegal and unthinkable. Now, I know when pro-lifers like myself, we talk about making abortion illegal, doing away with legal abortion, it does seem scary to many people. If we were, I think, I can't see everybody, but it looks like pretty much everyone here was born after 1973. We have actually never lived in a country without legal abortion. We've, survived the abortion gauntlet. Congratulations. I think the biggest challenge we have, though, in the pro-life movement is making this reality, making this anti-abortion future seem less scary. I don't think we actually need to spend all of our time and money talking about the development of a human fetus in the womb or the violence of the abortion procedure. I actually think if someone gave me $1 billion today to end abortion, I would put the vast majority of those financial resources into promoting the resources we currently have in place in our communities and filling the gaps of saying, we can do better. There's more we can do. I think the biggest challenge in the polling I mentioned earlier, when we were asking this generation, 18 to 34-year-olds, how they viewed abortion, the second half of the poll, I asked, what do you know about pregnancy and parenting resources? 2 out of 10 knew of pro-life alternatives in their community, where to send a friend who was in crisis but didn't want to go to a Planned Parenthood, didn't want to go to the abortion Goliath. Even pro-lifers themselves do not know where these resources are, yet they vastly outnumber the abortion industry. There's fewer than 600 abortion facilities today across America. There's more than 2,500 pregnancy centers. There's more than 8,000 federally qualified health centers. Free community health care clinics are located urban, rural, underserved neighborhoods that provide every single service that Planned Parenthood provides, minus abortion, plus way more. And actually have to make sure if you need a service, a healthcare service that they don't provide, they're actually legally obligated to make sure you get somewhere that can provide those services. We have the resources. If every single Planned Parenthood would shut down tomorrow in America, my dream, each federally qualified health center would only have to see 2 more patients per week because they're already serving more than 21 million men, women, and children. The resources are there. But like I said, I think our problem in creating this future that is anti-abortion is explaining that, telling women and men where they can go for real help in their community. I think of it as what happened the first time I took my kids to Yellowstone. My husband and I loaded up the minivan, and I'm super type A, so I had made all of our meal lists, and I had to figure out like every single food item we were going to eat for 2 weeks and like what spices I was going to bring. I figured out all the clothing needs for all 6 human beings in our car. I figured out games. I printed out activity sheets. I went to, I think, Dollar General and bought like free crappy prizes to throw back at the kids when they were being good if they got, if they got too loud. I did all of these things to like make our trip to Yellowstone, this 15-hour trek, as calm as possible because I knew this is going to be crazy. 4 kids in a minivan driving across North Dakota. It was not fun. We were going from Minnesota to Montana. And we got in the car. We got midway through North Dakota, which lovely state, nothing there, but lovely. And I was like banging my head against the window because I had failed to do one very easy thing before we left our house in St. Paul. I failed to print out a map for my kids. Now, they couldn't read yet, but I could have printed out a map of like our house with like a star, our destination in Billings, some dots along the way to show them where we're going to stop for potty breaks or for lunch. Because not doing that meant the entire car ride I got, how much longer? Are we there yet? Where are we? Like, I got hundreds of those statements. Safe to say, I never leave home without making my kids a map now. Now they have iPads, so my oldest just brings it up on his Google Maps. But like that one mistake that I made of printing that map was so infuriating and drove my husband and I insane. That is kind of how I think what's happened in the pro-life movement. We have a vision for making abortion illegal and unthinkable in our nation. We're actively working towards that goal, but we failed to bring along a lot of other people with us to paint the vision of what a future without abortion looks like. So that's on us. That's our job. And we need to be talking about that. So I know it may sound trivial, but I think that's how I see where we are today. Because unless you become a science denier, it's clear that human life begins at conception. It's clear that every single abortion is an act of violence. And it's clear that abortion harms women. But I know there are lingering questions and there's justifications for abortion. And largely, I think that's because of the unknown. The questions of getting rid of this legal procedure that we've lived with our entire lives. But regardless of the political or religious labels you adopt, we should all agree that human life matters and it's valuable. We should all agree that caring for a mother in an unplanned pregnancy and then after the birth of her child is crucial. So we should start there and work our way back to creating an anti-abortion future. So, questions? I'd love to have your questions. You can come down here. There's a microphone. You can ask me any question you want. If you have more than one question, I would just ask that you go back to the end of the line, so if there's other people, they can ask their question too. Hi.
Thank you. Testing, testing. Is it on?
Yeah, I think
It's on?
well, I can hear her, but I don't know if it's on.
I mean, I can yell if y'all want me to. I don't care either way. Here, see if it's on. Did you say something? Yo,
It's
what's
on.
up?
There you go.
Y'all are going to start clapping now, but most of you probably will not be clapping after I have to say what I have to say.
What's your
First
question?
of all, I just wanted to point out, I hate the word fetus phobic. I have been hate crimes my entire life for being gay and a person of color, and I have never once had a fetus crying because kids pushed them down the stairs and called their father a terrorist, telling them that they were going to do the next 9/11. So I'd appreciate if that word was never brought up again for the sake of me and any other person of color or gay person that has ever been harmed, abused, or hurt at any point in time during years and years and years of living. But my actual question is, you said that there were lots of resources to help women who can't really support having a child, who can't, pay the extensive medical bills to actually go to the doctor, who can't actually support a child after they're born, which is quite unfortunate because it is quite abusive to bring a child into a world knowing that they have a high chance of having a really, really bad future. But what would you say about all of the children that after they are, forced to be born into a world where they can't really succeed, that they are stuck in a foster care or adoption system in which most of them end up aging out and having a higher risk of unemployment, incarceration, or poverty? My brother was adopted. Luckily for us, we were able to adopt him from a third world country, which is, by the way, way, way worse in terms of the amount of kids that are put into adoption care centers. There were 18 kids living in a single room. So my argument is, why do we care more about something that has yet to be born than the children that are already out there? And why are we trying to push more people to put kids in this situation? It breaks my heart that you would let that happen to another kid like it happened to my brother.
My question, and there's a lot that I can respond to on that, and I will. My first question is, though, is how many kids in foster care today should we kill then who are suffering?
How many should be killed?
Yeah,
Why would you put them in the situation in the first place?
Well, I mean, if
If they wouldn't have been put out there by that person.
so, but if there's children in foster care right now who are suffering either here in America or across the globe, which you are absolutely right, the adoption system is completely broken, and these orphanages across the globe are just the conditions are despicable. Shouldn't we just go and kill them right now?
Well, you said that you have the resources to take care of these people after they are born.
Sure.
Why are we not taking care of them before they are too old and age out of the system anyway?
But my question is to you, and I will answer all these resource questions, how many of them should die right now? Because isn't that the most compassionate thing? If they're going to be suffering, shouldn't we, and they're suffering right now, why aren't we killing them?
Because they are actually born, they are alive, they have been able to enter this world that you forcibly put them in by making it so that they couldn't have, been exposed to the horrible situation in the first place. It honestly hurts. I did a project last semester regarding this exact topic. We researched both sides. We researched people who were okay with abortion being legal and people who did not like abortion being legal. We researched Planned Parenthood, and we tried to find other organizations that supported the pro-life movement, to which we didn't really find a lot. Most of them were church funded, which is fantastic, but also it's just very hard to be able to sit here and listen when I have seen a lot of things that kind of show a lack for actually giving care to these people after they are born, especially to a lot of communities that have trouble as it begins. Like, I don't think you understand how hard it is for people with a low social economic status, for people that are
Exactly, it's very hard for them. So how many of them
take
should
care
be
of a
killed?
kid. My question to you is, how are you going to take care of them?
See, the entire premise, though, of what you're saying is that a child in the womb, you are fetus phobic, because what you're saying is a human fetus in the womb doesn't have the same rights as someone.
Is a fetus? What gender is a fetus? What sexuality is a fetus? What religion is
Well,
a fetus?
a fetus can be male or female, and that's determined when egg and sperm unite and that DNA code is created.
If I was angry at a fetus for being male or female, that would make me misogynist or misandrist. Saying that I do not think that we should be supporting something that is not born more than people that are already out here in the world does not make me fetus phobic, because that's not a thing to use.
You're phobic of fetuses.
Why are you trying to
You're labeling a whole class of human beings as less than you, and you're judging them, and you're saying because you were born, you have the right to end the life of another human being.
I'm saying that you should allow people that are actually in this world, that have experienced the type of hatred that you are very clearly spreading, to have the same type of love that you are giving to something that has yet to even leave the womb, who has yet to even feel or experience the type of hatred that people out here have.
But you're being discriminatory against a whole class of human beings based on their location.
So are you
That's
saying,
what you're doing.
Are you arguing that I am ageist or fetus phobic? Because there is a complete difference. It would be okay for you to say that I'm ageist because I have something against babies, but there is no such thing as being fetus phobic. I have never once heard that, not even in any of the research.
I know,
that
I just made it up tonight. It's really great. No, I mean, your argument is, isn't there something less extreme? Is there anything less extreme that you can think of to end poverty, to end the suffering of those who are in a bad foster care situation, who are waiting for adoptive family? Isn't there anything less extreme you can think of than ending their life?
Honestly, that's why I was asking you, where are your resources to give these women the money to take care of the kids? Where are the amount of people that are trying to lower the prices of adoption rates that people can adopt? Because we paid $40,000 to adopt my brother, by the way.
It's unbelievable.
That's a lot of money for a child. So why are you sitting here
it's
and
commoditization of human beings?
Why are you not trying to promote that people are given better resources and more money to help these children than to make it so that...
I am. That's actually what we do in the pro-life movement. We spend majority of our time, the majority of our money, if you look at pro-life organizations, is dedicated to supporting women in unplanned crisis pregnancies to make sure she can not only afford to keep her child and birth her child, but that she can make a plan for her child after her child's born, whether that's placing her child with an adoptive family or choosing to parent her child. That's what the pro-life movement does. We do that every single day. In fact, at our organization, Students for Life, we have a whole initiative called Pregnant on Campus. We just rebranded it to Standing With You, that works to transform campus policies that are discriminatory towards pregnant and parenting students. At Students for Life Action, our sister organization that I'm also a president of, one of our key pieces of legislation that we debuted last year was to make it easier to become a foster parent or adoptive parent in the state of Virginia by speeding up the home study process. So we are doing that. I get very offended, though, when you don't know me, you've never had a conversation with me, and you insinuate that the pro-life movement isn't doing enough for children who have been born. We do that every day. All of us should be doing that every single day. The only difference in the pro-life movement is that we're saying that a child in the womb is also equally deserving of human rights, because there's no fundamental difference between the fetus you once were and the person you are today. You are the exact same entity.
There's a really, really, really big difference. Actually.
What's the difference?
The difference is, in the situation that I was in, I was lucky enough to be born with lots and lots, $1.5 million worth of medical help, by the way, to actually be born. And
I'm so glad you were born here.
Sometimes I wish I wasn't, because it would be much easier for my mother, because she has a lot of medical issues now.
Well, I'm sorry you feel that way.
It is quite unfortunate. It would be so much easier for her if I wasn't, because then she would be able to actually...
Well, I'm glad you were born, so...
Thank you. That's one person. It's just... There's just so many things that I have a problem with in making it so that you do such a good job, from what I'm hearing, in trying to help as many people as possible, but... Is that in every single country too? Because according to the World Health Organization, one of the biggest causes of death for women across the world is unsafe abortions. So the question is that same money and help being offered to women who have no other way of stopping birth, of getting help for their medical services? Because it's easy for us to be able to give birth here, because we have lots of doctors that are here to help us. In third world and developing countries, they don't have the same type of medical enhancements, so it's easier for them to want to go with the unsafe way, because either way there's still a high risk of dying. This is just their lower risk of dying. How are we going to help them? How are we going to stop the fact that there are going to be people that are going to have unsafe abortions regardless? By offering the safe way of doing it, we're going to have less teenagers, less upset mothers, less people who have been abandoned by their families trying to terminate the pregnancy themselves and killing themselves in the process.
Well, women died today from legal abortions. In 1973, I don't know if you know this, there wasn't like a national abortion training moment. When Roe v. Wade and Doe v. Bolton were handed down by 7 men in the Supreme Court, people who were committing abortions just suddenly were able to advertise. In fact, in 1958, Planned Parenthood's own medical director, Mary Calderon, said that over 90% of abortions were being committed by physicians in good standing in their community. So the myth of tens of thousands of women, which I think is what you're getting at, dying of back alley abortions is just that. It's a myth. That's not the practical reality. In fact, in 1974, Planned Parenthood gave its highest honor to Christopher Tietz, a pro-abortion statistician who actually tracked the number of deaths from illegal and legal abortions before Roe versus Wade. In his estimation, it was fewer than 500 women dying a year from illegal and legal abortions in our country. So regardless, women will die from seeking abortions, regardless of whether or not it's legal or illegal. I still don't think that is justification. Just because something is dangerous, we should legalize it. I don't believe we should legalize bank robbery because bank robbers have a high likelihood of being shot to death and killed. I still think bank robbery is wrong, just like how taking an innocent human life in abortion is wrong. But I mean, what's interesting about your question, though, talking about, well, what are you doing across the globe, as if me, Kristan, and my organization has the resources and capability to handle and solve every societal ill. I mean, the question is, no one ever gets upset. Like, do you hate the American Diabetes Association?
I hate a lot of government-formed organizations.
But like the American Diabetes Association, if someone says, will you give money to American Diabetes Association to cure diabetes and to solve juvenile diabetes, which carries a high mortality rate, are you upset with them? Because what the hell? They're not doing anything to cure childhood cancer.
It's just you claim to care about every single child. When you say that all of these lives matter, every single one, I'm going to automatically assume you don't just mean us. Because in terms of the rest of the world, we have so much privilege and so much technology that if you're going to say you have love in your heart for every single life, that includes everyone. And I know it's not possible for anyone in this portion of the country to be able to help every single country, but if you're going to make that statement, then I would like to know that at some place in your heart and someplace in the future, when you continue to have these talks, that you're ready to back up the fact that at some point in time, these other countries that don't have this kind of support will receive the same type of help too.
Well, I mean, that's what we do in the pro-life movement. We elect pro-life politicians who appoint. So, for example, I have a friend who worked at the Department of State, and it was under USAID when I served in the government, and that's what he did, was to make sure that when we were sending foreign aid, which that's a whole topic discussion of how much foreign aid we should be giving other countries, but when we were sending foreign aid, we were making sure that aid was going to places to help lower the maternal mortality rate. So we are doing that, and I think we do that as a society. Can we do more? Absolutely. Every single one of us can do more, and I think you and I agree on that. But I do take exception with the fact that this is a common thing we hear in the pro-life movement, that if you're pro-life, if you're anti-abortion, you're not really pro-life, you're not really for lives unless you spend all of your time solving every societal ill, which is a practical impossibility that you can't do that.
That is true. I do have one more question for
Sure.
you specifically. I do not remember which state exactly it is. If any of you know, I would really love to know. But there was a state that was having extensive talks about making the punishment for having an abortion the death penalty. Does anybody remember which state?
It's come up in a couple different states, Oklahoma, Texas.
I was wondering what you thought about that. Because
Well, I'm against the death penalty. So
Okay.
even for convicted criminals, I don't think we should be putting human beings to death.
Okay,
so
thank you.
I'm against
Thank
that.
you. That's all I've got to say. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thanks for coming. Sorry, it's really hard to see you. There's like a
gotcha.
light. Is that good? A good height?
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, give me a sec. So I know this is all about like the future of anti-abortion, and the main focus is, of course, the future. But typically I like to debate people or talk about like important issues, mainly being abortion. And whenever I debate people, usually the first, or have a conversation, usually the first thing that people would bring up, because it's kind of like more of a, how do I say this? Symbolic type thing. Usually it has to do with rape or incest. And I can't, how to say this? Whenever I do like research it from like USA Today, and they get it from like the Guttmacher Institute.
Guttmacher.
Yeah. They usually say that 1% of rape or 1% of abortions is due to rape, and then 0.5% is due to incest.
Mm-hmm.
How am I supposed to like tell them that and effectively have that type of conversation?
Well, I mean, there's a couple of things. Usually when someone supports abortion and they bring up rape or incest, sexual assault, a lot of times they're not really asking if your position on abortion. They're actually asking whether you are a human being who has empathy and sympathy for other human beings. So I think the first thing we always should do as those who advocate against the violence of abortion is to advocate against the violence of sexual assault and be very firm and resolute in those feelings. Something that I find it very frustrating that those who advocate for abortion and extremist abortion policies, abortion all 9 months for whatever reason, taxpayer funded, constantly use rape and sexual assault as a justification for all 98.5% of abortion, or 98.5% of abortions. And so a lot of times if I'm having a discussion with somebody and rape or incest comes up, I'll say, let's set aside. Let's set aside abortion in cases of rape, abortion in cases of incest, abortion in cases of life of the mother is at risk. So that's about, at most, 3% of all abortions. Will you work with me and will you support a law that bans abortion in 97% of the other cases? I have yet to have somebody who asked me that question agree with me that the other 97% of abortion should be banned. And I think that's a really interesting position to start at because it shows they're not actually asking about that. They're using women who survive sexual assault as justification for extremist abortion policies. And I actually get really offended by that.
Yeah, I was curious about that. I think that's an interesting counter to someone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, if you talk about the child, right? So someone I was talking to on campus, they referred to my friend, I have a friend, Ryan, who was conceived in rape as a rape baby. And I thought that was pretty a dehumanizing term, first of all, because he's a human being. He was conceived in rape, and his father is a horrible, evil monster. But that doesn't mean Ryan is an evil monster. And I think it's pretty dehumanizing that we call children and adults who were conceived in rape. And I think it's pretty dehumanizing to them. So I would say that fundamentally, it doesn't change. Our position on abortion doesn't change, regardless of the circumstances of your conception. Now, we don't believe in the pro-life movement that women should be forced to become mothers. It's very simple, right? If you're talking about consensual sex, if you're engaging in heterosexual sex, you're acknowledging that a distinct possibility of your behavior, the consequence of your behavior, could be the creation of a unique, co-living human life. Like that's just, and if you're not smart enough to understand that, you shouldn't be having sex. In the cases of sexual assault, she didn't choose those actions. And I think that's what makes it so difficult because no one wants to force a woman to become a mother. And I think that's why we should be willing as a society, as a pro-life movement, and just as decent human beings to come alongside her and provide her every resource, means of support that we can. But my willingness to do that stops when you ask me to end the life of another human being.
Of course, yeah, I think that's a big thing that pro-life people have is that the fact that life would start at the zygote, and that's life. Mm-hmm. No matter what act is cast upon, it's just a life. I think that's a very good counter, and I think that's very good.
Yeah, I mean, you can also talk about a child, and what's actually assumed is that the majority of women who become pregnant as a result of sexual assault choose abortion. That's actually statistically not the case. The majority actually choose to either parent or place with an adopted family. But what's interesting, if you think about it, and I think actually brings back the point to the main thing, which is what is inside of her. Is what's inside of her a disposable commodity, a piece of property that you can do with what you want? Or is what's inside of her growing and living, kicking, moving, sucking his or her thumb, a human being with certain rights? And the way you can actually get to that point in a conversation is bring up, a very real possibility that a woman courageously decides to parent her child after she's been sexually assaulted. She survives a sexual assault, becomes pregnant, decides to give birth, decides to parent her child. What happens at 2 or 3 or 4? Her son looks at her one day and starts triggering flashbacks to her rapist. So suddenly her son looks like her rapist, and that she starts thinking, I need to kill this child because, this child's hurting me. No one would say she would be justified in smothering her child, drowning her child, shooting her child. We would all uniformly condemn that and say, no, you can't do that. Why? Because we as a society acknowledge that that child, no matter his parentage, no matter the horrific things his father did, is a human being with certain rights, and one of those rights is the right to life.
Yeah, that was just my
Hope
question.
that helps.
Yeah, it does, definitely, especially the counter. Thank you.
Thank you. Hi.
Hi, how are you?
Good.
Good. I just want to preface this by saying that I wish that our friend had stayed because I just wanted to say that as Christians, I think that we should recognize people's suffering, and I felt a lot of empathy for her. And I just felt really sad hearing her story, and yeah.
It was very sad.
Yeah, but one thing that I wanted to ask a question to address, I can't really pick out the premise of what she was asking, but she brought up the point a lot about how there is suffering in life, especially after birth and after these kids are birthed, how there is suffering met in the fostering system and in the abortion system. So how can we as Christians and non-Christians step up to help single mothers, to help these foster kids in our everyday life, not just through changing policy, but, the words we speak, the things we do with our hands? How can we work to make a change like that?
Well, if you look overall in the United States, there's about 100,000 children who are stuck in foster care, who are actively waiting to be adopted. I think, there's a common misperception of foster care in our country. Often we hear people saying, well, there's 400,000 kids in foster care. Why aren't they being adopted? The reality is they're not up for adoption, that their parents' rights actually haven't been extinguished, because the goal of foster care is family reunification. Mom, dad, they're in prison, they might be in addiction recovery. The goal is to keep the child with his or her parents or a close family member. So you can't just go and say, there's 400,000 children in foster care, we need to adopt. You actually can't do that. What she did bring up, what I thought was a very important point, was that there are a lot of children that age out of the foster care system, because there is families want to adopt babies. They don't want to adopt a 12-year-old who has attitude problems. And that is something that I think as Christians, I actually think, if the Christian church, if every single, there's like 16,000 denominations of Christianity in America, if every single church in America would just find one family in their church to foster, to adopt, to say we're willing to adopt, there would not be 100,000 children. And I actually think we saw that happen in Colorado. A group called Focus on the Family, which is an evangelical Christian organization, banded together with Christian churches throughout the state. And they saw a dramatic reduction, a 25% reduction of children waiting to be put into foster homes. But I also think it's important to think, too, it's not like a quick thing. It's not like, and that's why I was saying about the piece of legislation we sponsored in Virginia, that we actually had a pro-abortion endorsed legislator actually co-sponsored our bill. We actually met fierce opposition. And because they said that our bill would make it too fast for families to become foster families, and that we were making it too easy for people. And there was, and I met with some of these advocates, and they had some good things to say, of saying, we actually can't make the system work faster, because if you make the system work faster, you can be opening up children for abuse or putting them in homes that aren't aligned. There's a mismatch that happens there. So there's definitely more that we can do. I think the easiest thing is every church in America needs to have an Orphan Sunday and advocate for families within their church opening up their homes to become foster parents, and to be okay with not adopting, because that's also a big thing too, is you have a lot of folks who'll say, well, I'll foster if I can adopt, because it's hard, right? You become emotionally attached, you take care of another human being, you want them to become a member of your family, and that's not always, in the majority of cases, that's not the majority of cases when you're talking about foster care. So that's one very easy solution.
Cool, thank you.
Thanks for asking that.
Hi.
Hi. This is a good thing.
Yeah, that's fine.
Right there?
Okay. Hi. Since we were doing that before, I am a person of color. I'm also adopted. I'm glad I'm here. I was just gonna ask, how do you, well, let me rephrase. Like, how do you talk to those who are like afraid to speak out? Like, what's your advice to them? Like,
Afraid to speak out
Yes.
against abortion?
yes.
I don't know. I'm a pretty crass person. It's
Yeah.
more like
Yeah, I figured. Like, just like,
quit being lazy. I mean, because the challenge is if you don't speak up, if you don't act, who will? And those of you who understand that human life in the womb is equally valuable as human life outside the womb, you have a responsibility. I mean, that's actually the hard thing about learning about abortion. It is actually very easy, and I would live a much easier life if I never looked up what happens during abortion, if I could live my life in a blissful ignorance. And that's actually what I think a majority of people choose, to be in a blissful ignorance of like, I don't want to be pro-life or pro-choice. I'm just going to be here somewhere in the middle. Therefore, I'm never considered an extremist or having any difficult opinions ever. But they're choosing to keep their head in the sand. And I think that's actually wrong. So sorry, just do it. And there's easy things you can do too. I would say that there are steps, like not everyone needs to get up on stage and be willing to take questions from people you don't know. Like you can put a pro-life bumper sticker on your laptop, or wear a pro-life t-shirt, or put a bumper sticker on your car. Like you can do easy baby steps to start a conversation with someone.
Hi, I want to say thank you for coming tonight. I know a lot of us appreciate getting to hear you. So I'm a part of Students for Life on campus, and I'm very, very vocal when it comes to social media. I've gotten a lot of backlash from that, but I've also had a lot of good conversations. Good. One thing that I've found in the last few years is that there's been a shift in attitudes. So what used to be people saying, well, if she was raped, well, if she's, in an abusive relationship, these kinds of things, it's kind of shifted to Yeetus the fetus, my body, my choice.
Yeetus,
I know, yeah, it's weird. It's a parasite, all these things that I don't know where they come up with it. So how do we as pro-lifers talk to people who have so little disregard for human life and such a selfish mentality?
Yeah, I think you keep doing it and you refuse to be silenced. I hate to be the bearer of bad news. I'm reading a book today on the Bolshevik Revolution, and it's not going to get better. And if you actually think it's going to get better, you get your head in the sand. There is a soft totalitarianism coming for our country. In fact, I would say you probably were in it. And it is going to get increasingly difficult to speak out. It's not going to be a revolution with guns in concentration camps, but it's already coming, and you see it from the woke corporations, canceling people. We see it right now on Capitol Hill. There's a bill called the For the People Act. We call it For the Corrupt Politicians Act, which will basically invalidate every single state election law. And it's, the guise is we're creating election integrity, but the part of the 700-page bill that no one seems to talk about is that will force private nonprofit organizations like ours to disclose our supporters so they can be open to being protested and canceled. And so it's not actually going to get easier. But that doesn't mean we should become quiet or we should be complicit and saying, well, we have to go along to get along. I actually think now is the time for you to get louder. Now is the time for you to speak out more, because the dehumanization that we're seeing across the board when people refer to a child in the womb, I think is a very scary reflection of how people see themselves, and just the utter lack of value that people, we heard it from the first young woman who came up and asked a question, who very sadly said to a room full of strangers that she kind of wishes she wasn't born. And when I told her that I'm glad that she was born, she said, well, at least that's one person. That's a really sad statement to make. And I was at the University of North Florida a couple weeks ago, and I had a student there who basically said, well, humans are parasites on the earth. And I had asked him, I said, well, which parasites would you like to get rid of? And he was like, all of us. And I said, well, what keeps you from killing yourself? And he said, I don't know, my dog, he's cuddly. That's a sad post-Christian worldview that we're living in, where people don't actually know that they have value and that they belong. So I think now is the time for you to speak up and be louder than ever before, and it's going to get worse. The cyberbullying that we've seen at Students for Life with high school students, with college chapters, has only gotten worse. We have more free speech legal cases today than we've ever had before. I had to hire a full-time general counsel. I can no longer just use free lawyers to help us when there's free speech cases, because there's so much incoming hate and discrimination that we're enduring. Our sister organization up in Canada has seen this for years. They're not even allowed to have fetal models when they table on campus because showing a fetus is triggering. Showing ultrasound images, real live ultrasound images of children in the womb alive, is considered triggering and hateful, and it's labeled hate speech. So we have to continue to speak up, and we can't be silenced or being said, well, maybe we are being triggered. Maybe we should stop saying that. I mean, the woman earlier called me a bigot and all these other things. You can call me those things. I know I'm not. But those are the labels that they continue, and they will continue to attach to people who advocate against the violence of abortion. So, sorry, I wish I had more. Maybe I shouldn't have read the Bolshevik stuff today.
It's okay, thank you.
You're like, crap. Get a bottle of wine. I don't know. Is this good?
Okay. Hello?
Hi.
Hi. So in recent times, like you were saying, you love about our generations, how we're so willing to stand up for human life and looking at discrimination outside, such as, the core ethos of the Black Lives Matter movement and the recent Protect Asian Lives and things like that. But clearly the hypocrisy of, this and the pro-abortion movement is so clear to people who are anti-abortion, but it's clearly not being reconciled outside. So in addition to just speaking up and sort of like bringing these issues to the forefront, are there any existing initiatives or organizations focusing on this minority activism or peeling back this curtain that we can sort of like join up with or share as resources?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's something that the pro-life movement has been trying to mobilize minority voices. So whether it's African-American women, Latino women, LGBTQ persons who are pro-life to speak up, because their voices matter. And I think a lot of times when you have a person of color speaking out against the abortion industry, which we know, Planned Parenthood directly targets minority neighborhoods, low-income neighborhoods. 80% of their Planned Parenthood abortion facilities are in minority dense walkable areas. The founder of Planned Parenthood was a eugenicist that they still apologize and try to excuse her behavior and writings for. So I think we need to do a better job of encouraging people, no matter what their color is, their religion, their sexuality, to be a part of us. That's actually why I like using the term anti-abortion when we refer to who we are and what we're doing, because sadly, and from the research that we've done, Students for Life, a lot of people hear the word pro-life, and the left has done a lot of damage to that word pro-life, of painting and creating a media narrative of who pro-lifers are. When women hear the word pro-life, they think of old white guy with a crucifix yelling at a young woman. And that is not the case, but that's what people think, because those are the images the mainstream media pummels you with. So I actually like using the term anti-abortion as opposed to the term pro-life, because I think it's less loaded. And look, you can be a Democrat. You can disagree with every other political, position I hold. You can be an LGBTQ person and have one of the whatever 60-some genders, and you can still agree with me that the violence of abortion is wrong and that every human being deserves fundamentally the right to live. We can disagree about how to solve the immigration crisis at the border and respect human beings. We can disagree how to help children stuck in failing inner city schools get the education they deserve as Americans to succeed. But it doesn't mean, first of all, that one person over another or one party over another cares about human beings and the other one doesn't. I think that's where the breakdown in our whole civil discourse is like, I have a policy prescription that I think would solve the immigration crisis. You do, but yet we demonize the other side. We dehumanize the other side and say, they hate everybody who's brown and they're a bunch of racist whatever. And instead of saying, I deeply disagree with the policy because this, and this, and we, science and social science has proven we can't do this, whatever. We just say, you're a bigot, sit down, shut up. And we're kind of like lazy. So I actually like using this label. And I think it helps when you're talking to people who come from a vastly different worldview or experience or like hate Republicans and are still using like, language like, oh, Republicans are racist, homophobes, whatever. You can say, look, like, I'm not saying you be Republican. I'm just saying, are you against the violence of abortion? Can we at least agree on that?
Thank you.
Thanks. Well, it's like great service. You like, Laurie.
Hello, my name is Eva, and I had a question, but it kind of has to do with somebody's question that was about like how, like, if you're afraid to speak up, what do you recommend, I guess. And after that question, I wanted to say something because I have definitely been in a situation where I've been like afraid to speak up. I went to high school in a school that was most people were pro-choice, and so I was pro-life, but I also had really close friends who were pro-choice, and I could like really empathize with them, but I also didn't agree with them. And so, but we were able to have like dialogues about it, and I think that was really cool because sometimes, I know you had said like speak up and get loud, but I think there's also a power in knowing, like, in listening to somebody so that you can like know them and let them know that they are loved first, and then help them listen to you so they don't stop listening, because I think that a lot of times with the pro-life or anti-abortion, pro-abortion thing, a lot of times people end up just kind of yelling at each other, but I think we have a lot of similar, like a lot of common ground. Like the girl that came up earlier, I wanted to give her a hug because I felt like her beliefs were drastically different from mine, but I could tell she was hurting in a way that, like, we're all human, we know how it is to hurt, and we all have, difficult things in our life. And so I guess, because I think that, sometimes when you listen, while it's very powerful, sometimes you can, these things are really confusing, and sometimes, that could lead you to like maybe shallowing your viewpoint. And that's not what I'm advocating. I think that it's really important to know what we believe, and to know why, and to like know the truth about like abortion, and like the violence of it, and to surround yourself with people that like know truth. But I just wondered to know, like, if you had any insight in that, or like suggestions for how to do that, and to like let people know that, like build off of common ground, I guess, if that makes sense.
So your question is, what do we do to build off common ground?
Yeah, sorry, I talked a lot and then I had the question again.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, I think we continue to do what we've been doing in the pro-life movement. I think one of the things that you all with the Students for Life group here, can constantly, when you're tabling or having events, of inviting those who disagree with you to come to your meetings and to come to events and to work with you to transform the policies on campus to support pregnant and parenting women. I think that's something that everyone should be able to agree, that a woman who is pregnant or parenting should be given the tools and the support here at WKU so she never feels like she has to choose between the life of her child and her education. And that's something that both sides should agree on. Now, I will tell you, in the history of Students for Life, when we do invite pro-choice groups and pro-abortion groups to join us in those discussions, they don't really ever show up. But I think we should continue to extend and offer that to those who advocate for abortion. I mean, I would like to kind of get to kind of the other underlying point you were making, though, because the reality is, I think sometimes as pro-life people or anti-abortion people fall into this trap of if only they knew how much we cared, they would like us. And I hate to burst your bubble, but some people will still hate you. And no matter how much compassion you have or empathy you have or how much you're willing to do for those who are suffering, some people fundamentally will always disagree with you and they will label you a hater because of that. And I think we as pro-lifers need to be okay with some people hating us because you will drive yourself nuts trying to and seeking the approval of every single person because that's more of a problem that they have than that you have. And I think we need to be very careful of not falling into this trap. Like we've had Students for Life groups that we've worked with in the past have said, well, we need to show everybody on campus how much pro-lifers care about other human beings. And so they get very busy engaging in all of these other really important human rights causes. And then pretty soon, no one's doing anything about abortion anymore because they don't have time to do anything about abortion because they're active in the anti-sex trafficking movement or they're doing all the very important things. But it's like, hey, wait a minute, we started this group because this is the largest human rights violation our world knows and it deserves its own damn club. And we should be okay with saying, yeah, I'm anti-abortion. I'm also anti a lot of other things, and I support a lot of other causes. I might give money, or I might lend, material support or volunteer support, but I think we should have a club just about this. And I think that's very important that we don't fall into that trap of, well, in order to show everybody how pro-life we are, we have to do everything, because that's not feasible. You don't have enough hours in the day. You don't have enough dollars in your bank account to engage in every single human rights injustice. But your collection, your unique collection of people, no matter how diverse their backgrounds, should be able to all agree that we need to end that. Sorry, good.
Oh, you're fine. Don't worry about it. All right. So my question is, so you're talking about the number of resources that are available to women who have untimely pregnancies that promote life and everything like that. Why are I guess maybe this is just my view of it, because you see like the ads something on YouTube about Planned Parenthood, stuff like that. Why aren't there more promotions for the other resources that you were talking about? Is there a reason behind that? Am I just kind of oblivious to it?
There's a couple of reasons.
But what are the reasons behind that, and how do you suggest?
Well, one thing is the pro-life movement just kind of sucks at marketing. We're kind of terrible at it. We spend all of our time and mental focus of like make sure we have the resources. Like when I was preparing for this trip to Yellowstone with my kids, but I forgot this one thing. And the thing about marketing is that's actually oftentimes the most expensive thing you can do. Marketing is what sucks the dollars. Like, oh, you clicked an ad, that'll be $3.50 you have to pay to Google. And so it's very, very expensive. And sometimes it's hard to tell whether or not you're doing it right. So one, we just sort of suck at marketing. And a lot of the pregnancy centers and maternity homes, they were started by amazing volunteers in their community who had no formal marketing experience. They were just like, hey, there's a problem. There's a gap of support services. We want to found something to support women, but it wasn't started by like this big corporation that said, first, we need to create the client, and second, then we provide the resource. So it actually was kind of like the inverse happened. So I think that's kind of one of the big things. I think another thing to think about is Planned Parenthood is subsidized by the federal government. You and I pay Planned Parenthood to the tune of about $600 million every single year. They can offer cheaper abortions than local mom and pop chop shops because they are federally subsidized. So they actually get hundreds of thousands of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars that they can funnel into marketing to drive women into their clinics. Where pregnancy centers are not getting federal taxpayer dollars. I mean, that's the problem with federally qualified health centers. There's more than 8,000 FQHCs that are actually already getting federal subsidies, but it's different because they're not one conglomerate. Planned Parenthood is like the big Goliath. They're one conglomerate. So there's one national office that can set marketing, and they might give individual, affiliates the ability to come up with new marketing strategies, but the national conglomerate, Planned Parenthood Federation has a marketing strategy where like the 8,000 federally qualified health centers, they're like independent nonprofits. They're not a for-profit entity.
I guess the next question would just be like, how do we go about promoting those? But I guess, we have social media. There's ways to do that. So, yes. All right.
Yeah,
Thank
absolutely.
you. Yeah. That's all I have. Thank you so much. And also thank you to everyone who's come up and asked questions. It takes a lot of guts to come up and ask questions. I was sitting in that chair over here while like 4 other people were over here asking questions and trying to figure out what I was going to say. So good job, all of you guys. Round of applause to you guys as well.
So I have another question. I know that moving on with the anti-abortion community, it's going to be a lot of legislation and getting kind of that on Capitol Hill going. So I'm not anywhere in political science, whatever. I'm in dietetics, I'm in nutrition, and I will be going into the military. So I feel like my major is not anywhere near what it would be if I wanted to go forward with the anti-abortion community. How can I or others who are like me, who that is not their career goal, make that part of their life other than just joining their local organizations and donating their time and money, more so focused on elections and getting things going that way? How can we who aren't going in that direction still work that way a little bit?
I mean, the great thing about the pro-life movement is no matter what your skill set is, your experience, your major, there is a way for you to serve because it is a global problem, right? It's a national problem, but it's also a global problem. And so there's a lot of ways you can serve in the pro-life movement. Sometimes it's being creative. Sometimes it's just donating or putting a pro-life bumper sticker or listening to podcasts. So, when, the topic of abortion comes up, you can actually engage in a discussion and bring value to that conversation and plant a seed of truth. When it comes to politics is, one way we fight to end abortion. Sometimes people think it's like the only thing we do. It's actually not. It's really not. But you can get involved with a local organization to go door knocking, register voters, and talk to people, neighbors, community members, church or parish members about the voting records of politicians. By the way, Kentucky has some problems. There was like a major pro-life bill, an omnibus bill that was introduced that your Republican leadership refused to advance because they only will pass 2 pro-life laws. So it's not just like this Republican versus Democrat thing. You got some lazy ass Republicans in Frankfurt that need to be primaried because they say they're pro-life, but they're not willing to do anything about it. And so that's really easy. You don't have to have a poli-sci degree to do that. You can just talk about that, or call them, or post a tweet to politicians hate when people call or show up at their office. You don't have to have any special knowledge to be like, hey, I read this article and it seems like you say you're pro-life, but then you're unwilling to do it, and that scares them. Even with your major, I'm sitting here thinking what you can do. I was watching an article today that Black Lives Matter movement put on their Instagram about women in ICE detention centers who are pregnant being underweight because the food is so bad. Seems like something a pro-lifer could fix. Of hey, we need to fix this, ICE, and make sure women in immigration detention centers who are pregnant are getting nutritious food. So, see, even something you can do in your major.
Hi.
Hi.
Thanks for coming out. I have a question, particularly regarding Students for Life.
Mm-hmm.
So, for one, I appreciate your optimism about the future of abortion. From my experience, though, what I have seen is that for a lot of people, regardless of the facts about abortion, it doesn't really change their mind necessarily, because the need to have it's important
to change their behavior.
Well, right. And then not only that, but the ideas that they have about women, about motherhood, about sexuality, all of those things are so, that is more important to them than a human life. And to give up abortion undermines all those other beliefs that they have. So, I mean, they may even be convinced that, it is a human life that is being killed. And then at the end of the day, they're just kind of like, that's too bad.
Yep. I have had people say that.
And so I guess my question is, the concern that I have is that I think that this is a problem even among people who would oppose abortion, who otherwise, they think abortion is atrocious, but they think that it's still kind of necessary, because even if they don't realize it, they hold some of these views of our culture about, motherhood is something that holds women back, or a baby is too much of a burden, or we should, not put kind of restrictions on people's sexuality, things like that. So what is Students for Life doing to address some of those underlying things that make abortion necessary, I guess I should say? It's taking on another controversial aspect of our culture, I guess. But is Students for Life doing anything to try to talk about views of women, about motherhood, and about sexuality?
Well, we do that, all the time when we're advocating against abortion, to say abortion is never necessary. And in fact, it's a tool of the patriarchy and the opposite of empowerment. That, women are superheroes because they can lactate, gestate, and menstruate, 3 things men can never do. So women are powerful, and the fact that we can do those things. So I don't know what it is you're asking us to do, because we do speak about, like my first speaking tour on college campuses was The Lies That Feminists Tell, and it was about the first wave of feminism and how the second wave of feminism was corrupted by 2 men who founded NARAL, the National Association for the Repeal of Abortion Laws, and how they duped the second wave of feminism into believing that somehow killing a preborn baby girl is empowerment, when it's in fact the opposite. So I don't know what it is that you think or want us to do besides saying there's never a justification for ending a human life. Abortion is not necessary.
Right. Actually, it was more just curiosity as to what all Students for Life does, and so you answered my question though.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
we talk about it all the time.
all right, awesome. Thank you.
Thanks.
Hello.
Hi.
First of all, I'm really glad that you're here and I really appreciate Students for Life, because I felt lonely being pro-life a lot, but I appreciate having a lot of other people being pro-life with me, and I really love that so much. But anyways, my question, one time I was having a conversation about a friend, and one argument he used for abortion is that when someone in a hospital is brain dead, then they're technically presumed dead, and that's when the doctors pull the plug. So because of that, he believes that when a fetus, before it has a brain, then it's not alive. What would you say about that?
Well, that's a sentence, so they'll say, there's a lot, because it's a very slippery slope. So Jordan turns 25 in this month. Congratulations, Jordan. Your brain will be fully developed at 25. So right now, is Jordan less of a person deserving of human rights than he is at the end of the month? Because his brain actually isn't fully cognitive. He doesn't have full cognitive ability until he's 25. And then at 25, your cognitive ability actually decreases every year. So it's a very slippery slope to be able to say that a person's cognitive ability determines their value and personhood. So I mean that you could go into a lot of different arguments when you're talking about sentience, but we know brain waves are detected. What I say, it was like at 6 weeks, brain waves can be detected in the womb. That's like when all abortions start, because most women don't even know that they're pregnant until 5 or 6 weeks after their LMP, last menstrual cycle.
Yeah, I definitely agree with all that you just said. But mainly what my
I would also disagree with the unplugging people on that's actually an assisted suicide argument and euthanasia argument of saying, well, if you're brain dead, we should end your life support, because that's actually highly debatable in the medical community as to what time period should, organ harvesting and organ donation should occur if a person's heart is still beating.
Yeah, absolutely. So, but also you said that the baby doesn't develop the brain until it's 6 weeks old. So, but my friend believes that before the baby has a brain at all, like not even a developing brain, like it doesn't have a brain, therefore it's not alive. What would you say about that?
Well, what would he say about somebody who was born with anencephaly with half a brain?
What is that?
So I met a child a couple years ago who was anencephalic. Most of children who are born with anencephaly die within a few minutes of birth. Some of them live a lot longer. Jackson lived until he was 6 years old, but he was born with half of a brain. Because Jackson was born with half a brain, did that make him less of a person? See, the fundamental premise of the pro-life movement is not based on future abilities or future functions that you have simply because you have the capacity to have those abilities, simply because you are a member of our species. You have a right to life, and you have value, and you have dignity. And so it doesn't matter. And sometimes, like, I'll be debating somebody and they'll try to argue with me about embryology. And I'm like, oh, well, I'll say the heart begins to beat at 21. And they're like, well, it's only part of the heart because the heart isn't fully formed until 8 weeks. So, okay, all right, fine. So, we can argue even about sometimes the facts, or people will use different terms that are more dehumanizing towards the preborn child. But the fundamental premise of the pro-life movement is at the moment of conception, when egg and sperm unite, a unique DNA code is formed. That human life, that zygote, that embryo, which becomes a fetus, which becomes an infant, which becomes a toddler, which becomes an adolescent, has the same value at that moment when egg and sperm unite as you do today. Does that help you?
Ish, but you gave the example of someone with half a brain, but he still has a brain, even if it's just half.
But see, what your friend would argue is, aren't there varying degrees of personhood? And that's a very slippery slope, because if you're saying you only have rights if you have a full brain, if someone has half a brain, don't they have half the personhood rights that you do? And who determines that slippery slope? See, we think in the pro-life movement, and as history has shown, you can't have varying degrees of personhood. Somebody can't be 3/5 a person. Either they're a person or they're not. Either if they have value or they don't.
That does make sense. I guess the question I should be asking is, how do I tell him that, when the egg and sperm come together, that thing is alive? He doesn't deny that it's a human.
Well, it's alive because it's growing. Cells instantly multiply. So instantly. And there's a really great TED Talk with an embryologist who describes the development of human fetus. He talks about an elephant fetus, all of these different fetuses, and how quickly, since the moment of conception, that new entity starts procreating, and it's self-directed, it's whole, meaning it directs its growth. When I was pregnant with my children, my body wasn't directing my children how to grow. It is self-directed. So it is obviously alive because it's growing. Dead things don't grow.
Right. Okay, that's it. Thank you.
Hope that helps.
Hello.
It's fine. Okay, you're good. Thank you very much.
I'm very jealous of your drink right now, but go ahead.
I just have a quick question. So, coming from another woman, we don't know if we missed this or not. We just got here. But what's your opinion on like women who, get raped in other circumstances where they're not mentally prepared to have that child, and then with the adoption centers being so over full and everything, and then people staying in the adoption agencies till they're 18 years old, and that leads to depression and drug usage and other mental issues.
Sure. A couple of clarifying questions. Aside from cases of sexual assault or life of the mother, so the 97% of all other abortions, are you against those other abortions?
I'm pro-choice, personally.
So you're for abortions for any reason?
I am.
Not just for rape?
Right.
Okay. Do you think it's a little disingenuous that in order to defend your position that abortion should be allowed and up to the moment of birth for whatever reason, that the first question you want to talk about is women who've been sexually assaulted, and you want to use that to justify all 100% of abortions when it's about 1% of all abortions?
I'm not necessarily justifying it. I just know that once I come with, you really don't have a say to another woman's body, and we shouldn't make those laws, then that kind of gets difficult with differing opinions.
All right, another question I'd have so the children who are languishing in foster care right now, the 100,000 of them who are waiting for adoptive families, many of them are in high school or middle school, how many of them should be put to death today because they're suffering?
I don't really know.
Would you think that any of them should be killed because they're suffering?
I'm sorry, what was the question?
Someone who's in foster care today, a 14-year-old child, do you think because that child may be in a bad abusive situation in foster care, do you think that child should be put to death?
I see it different, murdering a 14-year-old that's living on this earth, brought to life, rather than a baby that's barely developed in the womb.
And that is the fundamental difference than you and I. Because the argument we have in the pro-life movement is that science proves to us that the moment of conception, a unique, whole, living human being comes into existence that never existed before and will never exist again. It has a unique genetic code. Simply because they are a human being and a member of our species gives them value, and that there's no fundamental difference between the fetus that you once were, the embryo that you once were, and the person you are today. You've always had the same intrinsic worth and the same value, and that doesn't change depending on your age, or depending on your location, or depending on who your parents may be, or the circumstances of your conception, or the amount of money in your parents' bank account. You have value and worth, and you should have the right to live. That's our entire premise in the pro-life movement.
Okay, so never mind. I think that answered it.
Thank you. Thank you guys for coming tonight.
Do we have any other questions before we wrap up? Yeah?
Last one.
Yeah.
90-minute.
Sorry.
Hello, thank you for coming. I don't really have a fully formed question. I kind of have a vague one of how important do you think the role of sex education is in an anti-abortion future?
I would say, I don't know where you stand on the position of abortion. I would say that we need to be teaching children that if you don't want to get pregnant, don't have sex. And if you choose to engage in heterosexual sex, then you should be ready and willing to accept one of the natural consequences of that behavior. And just like how we don't, teach kids how to drink and drive well and say, here's a bunch of vodka, drink it, and then we'll teach you how to drive so you don't kill somebody. I don't believe that we should be telling children, well, here's all the ways that you can engage in sex safely, and I use that word loosely because we're currently living an STD epidemic from the CDC, and therefore then expect that children aren't going to have sex.
So do you think like sex education should be required in public schools?
I believe that children should be told the truth about sex, the consequences of sex, and I think they should be told that we expect them to not have sex until they're ready to become a parent, but that if they do choose to engage in sex and they do become pregnant, these are all the resources that we have available to them.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Thank you.